Well, I'm Brian with Historic Woodwork. Whoever thinks I've got it easy around here is far mistaken. These are some windows that I pulled out of the second floor of a house to do a partial restoration. This is the general condition of what they're in sometimes. I've got a broken pane of glass here. In order to reglaze this, this has got to come out. And what I use is a charcoal starter for your barbecue grill. And what I'm going to use it for is a putty softener. Now this is something I would never advise attempting to do indoors. You see, I have a fan blowing on me and I keep the smoke blowing away from me at all times. Just hold that thing on there for about 15 seconds and it melts it back to a semi-plastic state where it can be removed. And I would imagine it's going to take about 15 or 20 minutes to melt this one particular piece of glass out. Every so often you're going to encounter these little metal glazing points, and those were what held the glass in. You don't really want to touch the glass with this. Hold it up a little bit and it works a lot more effectively. I'm hitting one of those glazing points, and as I go along I try to pry them out, but some of them are quite stubborn and I have to come back to them later. This thing, it's a little difficult to get this tool into the corner, but it can be done. You just have to manipulate it in such a way that you can get as far into the corner as possible without burning the wood. And if you char it a little bit, that's not such a bad thing. You can just sand it out and paint it. People down here in Tampa love their wavy glass, and that's what happens when glass gets to be about 40 or 60 years old. Glass is always in a state of movement, and over years the glass will run and it distorts. When you look through it, it's wavy, and people go crazy over it down here. There's another one of those points I was telling you about. Here's one here. A little diamond-shaped point. You find them in picture frame shops, and glass companies all have them. Another advantage of this particular tool is you may have a window that is up on a second floor and there's a broken piece of glass and you want to repair it from the outside. Well, you can just run an extension cord up the ladder and do so. This works beautifully in the field. Anytime you're working with old glass, there's a pretty high attrition rate. There's about a 35% chance that it's going to get broken. If you get under a point and push too hard, you could break the glass. And so if you're working with a $130 pane of glass and you break it, well, then it becomes a $260 pane of glass. So that's why it really pays off to take your time and remove it as carefully as you possibly can. Now there's a lot of these little points left in here. Sometimes they're so stubborn you have to put this heating element on the point and heat it up. Here's another. This one's coming out pretty easy. Okay, now I'm going to tap it out from the back. Now before we put the glass in, there's some residual glazing that has crept around the edge of the glass, and that has to come out. You can pretty much just chip that out with a sharp chisel. There's a little bit in the corner that I did not get. And we have to get this glazing bed completely cleared of all of this rock hard glazing compound. I'm just going to clean this out down to bare wood with this chisel. I'm going to get all these little chips of glass out as well. And now I have it reasonably cleared out, and here's one more glazing point that I missed earlier. So that's a good sound. It's kind of a smooth sound of metal against wood. And I don't know if you can see it, but it is cleared out. There's no residual putty, no grit or anything. Even something like a fleck of sand can break a pane of glass, especially when you're trying to press it back in. I'm going to put some linseed oil on all this bare wood. I like the boiled linseed oil as opposed to the raw. When I put the new pane of glass in, I don't want this dry wood to draw the oil out of the new glazing compound. Then I'm going to take some whiting powder. If you don't have whiting powder, you can use plaster or drywall compound, the kind that you buy in a bag. It's dry when you get it. I've got a piece of glazing sitting here on this coffee warmer, and it is quite hot, but it's not hot enough that you can't touch it. And what I'm going to do is go around the edge of this glass, and incidentally, you can't cut yourself doing this. You can cut yourself if you go parallel to the edge of the glass. Another thing you can do is you can do this by this method as well. This is going to cushion this pane of glass when I drop it in that glazing bed. And if it's a big sheet of glass, a lot of times I'll lay it over the edge of the table or the edge of the project in this case. This is what we've been using for about 150 years, maybe longer. It's really nothing but whiting powder and linseed oil. And I've got a couple of places where there's a little bit of a gap, such as right here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some of these kitchen matches. I'm going to make up the difference with this matchstick here. Now I've got a toothpick that I'm going to use down here. There's a slight gap between the window frame and the glass. So we'll just force a toothpick in. And this one actually fits pretty good. So in order to hold the glass in, I'm going to take some of these glazing points, also known as easy points, and I'm going to put one here, one here. Takes a little bit of force. Now this is a flimsy piece of wood. It's called a muntin. Now I'm going to put some back force against it with the palm of my hand. And then just for the heck of it, let's put one up at the top and one down at the bottom. Now all we have to do is glaze it. Well, I have two putty knives that I use all the time. I have a straight one and I have a bent one. And I'm going to use DAP window glazing compound. And this is a fresh batch. It is sticky, so I'm going to drop it in this whiting powder, and it makes it a little easier to handle. It doesn't stick to my fingers. Then I'm just going to go along and force it in, and I want to really squish it in so that it gets around the edge of the glass and into every little gap. Another thing you can do is put some of this whiting powder on your hands. I've set up this ladder and I'm using it as an easel. And it's easy to twirl the sash around. And to tell you the truth, it's kind of relaxing to do this in my old age. Now I'm just going to and the idea here is when you look through from the other side, you don't want to see any of this glazing compound. We'll start in the corner, and sometimes you have to go over it a second or a third time. We'll just pull the excess away. A lot of times I'll come back and go at it from the side to clean up any of those imperfections. To smooth it out a little bit, I'm going to take a bristle brush and I'm going to dip it in this powder. And I'm just going to brush this powder on. Somebody I know calls it magic dust, fairy dust. It is nothing but whiting powder. And what I got to do now is this putty that I put on the glass. You remember when I was going around the edge of the glass? Well, I've got to remove that. And those little metal points that I put in are what hold this glass in place until this putty dries. Now I'm going to take some Windex. The other side, you have to be careful. You don't want to bump into your art project. Just spray some Windex on there. Let's take a brand new paintbrush, a nylon or polyester paintbrush. Just very neatly go up against the edge and get all of that oil from the glazing compound off of the glass. Then take a paper towel and double it over. And that's a big improvement. Well, that wraps it up for today. I'm Brian from Historic Woodwork, and thanks for joining us. Well, you know, I worked my off all day in the sun, and now I've got to go down to the Mason's Hall, and they're going to work my off all night. Got to be there at 6:30 in a damn tuxedo. See you later.